We see it in animals. I mean, we see it in mammals.
Again, he appeared just like how you would expect Diddy to appear for a hearing.
After the psychologist felt that he was no longer a threat to himself.
Oh gosh. The man who literally built his kingdom on glitz, glamour, and pure star power is now struggling with the very system he used to navigate like it was his personal playground. The irony is just, I can't even.
Sean Diddy Combs had a challenging Christmas this year, spending his first holiday season away from family. Sources indicate that the 55-year-old rapper experienced a meltdown while incarcerated at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, New York, where he was taken for observation due to mental instability. The music mogul, arrested in September on charges including racketeering, conspiracy, and trafficking, was reportedly hoping to secure bail by now. Spending the holidays behind bars was a nightmare for him, an insider told The Sun, noting that Combs managed to regain composure through meditation and deep breathing, although it took several hours to calm himself.
Let me spill the hottest tea right now. Behind the concrete walls of one of America's most infamous lockups, rumors are swirling. Is this really the end of Sean Diddy Combs' reign? Or honey, are we uncovering something way more scandalous? Let's be real. Diddy has always been the king of the spotlight. For decades, darling, he's been commanding stages like they were his birthright, building empire after empire worth billions, and rubbing shoulders with literally everyone who's anyone. The mastermind behind those unforgettable bops like I'll Be Missing You and Bad Boy for Life created this absolutely fabulous image of untouchable luxury that we all lived for.
What makes it worse is the food. Mostly everything is stale food, is old food that's donated by other people that they wrap up or they cook for you. Mostly everything they have is full of not roaches and the giant cockroaches. You know, you can smell the mold, you can smell the rot, you can smell the jail that it needs to be rebuilt. It needs help. I don't think anyone should be in that particular jail.
There are lots of different people inside that jail. We know that there's a wing that houses high-profile prisoners. R. Kelly, Ghislaine Maxwell, now P. Diddy's in there. Are you aware of the high-profile prisoners? Do you have any interaction with them?
I don't have any, and we never had interaction with high-profile prisoners at all.
And one of the main reasons that a lot of people know about the Metropolitan Detention Center was because it made headlines in 2019. And one of the issues they had was keeping their prison population warm. And it gets extremely cold in Brooklyn.
Well, in 2019, something went wrong. They had a power outage. They didn't have any water. They didn't have any lights. They didn't have any heat. And the mayor tried to the city council tried to bring over blankets, and the warden wouldn't accept it. They were banging. My brother called me from a cell phone that was not supposed to be there. And he cried. He said, listen, I think I'm gonna die in here. So I panicked. I said, what the hell you mean? You having problems with a prisoner? Do I have to, call a lawyer or what can I do? He said, no, I'm gonna freeze to death. I said, freeze? He said, yeah, we don't have no water. So I called the news station and made a whole big show. And I went down there and I, had to do something about it, not just for my brother, but for anybody. He was telling me that he thought his roommate was gonna die because his feet was turning purple. They didn't give my brother his medication. No gas, no lights, no water, no heat.
But get this, for someone like Diddy, who's used to nothing but the absolute finest things in life, adjusting to the harsh reality of MDC is like, imagine going from the Met Gala to a basement storage room. It's absolutely shocking.
Conditions inside of the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn during a 7-day power outage that caused protest and outrage by elected officials because of the cold temperatures and lack of heat were much worse than initially reported, according to new reporting by the New York Times. The accounts, according to the Times, are based on inmates, their defense lawyers, jail staff, union officials, and lawmakers. The report indicates inmates complained of cold, brackish water that ran from the taps. A client known to swallow razor blades said he had not gotten his psychiatric drugs. In another cell, a man lay on bloody sheets. That man had an infection on his leg, according to the Times, that got worse during the blackout. Allegedly, he had been denied antibiotics and Tylenol by jail staff. He was told to wash the wound with soap and water. The warden at the jail, which houses some 1,600 inmates, Mr. Herman Quay, has also been heavily criticized as dismissive and having a lack of urgency by lawmakers, activists, and even his own staff. According to the Times, union officials say Mr. Quay failed to set up an emergency command center or give staff instructions other than to keep inmates locked up. At one point, conditions were so bad that one inmate told his family a correction officer opened his cell door, allowing him into the warmer common area. "I don't know what's going on here," the guard told him, "but this is inhumane."
Now, you're probably dying to know what Diddy's life looks like these days. And trust me, it's nothing like his Instagram stories used to be.
Maybe food items that would be brought to him. And then obviously he'd be under 24-hour supervision, observation, so to speak. He'll would have had several visits from a psychologist or a clinician coming to check on him at least once every several hours, and having those conversations with him to see how he's feeling, what kind of mood he's in, and then he would have been taken off suicide watch after the psychologist felt that he was no longer a threat to himself. Or self-harm, rather.
Former inmates are spilling all the tea about the food situation, and it's absolutely horrific. They're calling it inmate slop. Can you even? Gone are the days of five-star restaurants and those expensive wines we used to see him sipping on social media. Now, even getting your hands on a simple snack from commissary is like trying to score front-row tickets to a sold-out concert.
And this is a man going from private chefs and food from across the world to a set menu just like any other detainee or inmate. What can you tell us about the food and the commissary in a place like the Federal Detention Center in Brooklyn?
It's a difference. That much I can tell you. You're going to have a lot of starchy foods, cereals. If you get any vegetables at all, they're old, so to speak. They are not fresh. Same fruits and vegetables, no good. A lot of processed foods, some rice and beans and muffins and things that generally most people don't like to eat. It's not terribly healthy. And again, the government wants that as a consequence of this process. So certainly it is an adjustment. Most people will lose weight. And it's hard because he can't even really exercise in this environment. There's no outdoor, like I've said before, it's not one of these camps where you can walk around a track. Even in a high security penitentiary like Atlanta, there's going to be a track and outdoors. When you're in a detention center, locked down 23 hours a day, not eating healthy foods or getting your medications, it could test even the strongest person. And again, that's what I would say to him. Your family is watching. There are people, so many are critical of him, I understand, but there are also those that love and support him who are watching. So as crazy as it sounds to some, and I've been called crazy, it's an opportunity to demonstrate leadership, to express to his family. Others have gone through misery and struggle. They have emerged strong, with dignity, with a plan. And as I said earlier, once he embraces a better message, that it's not about him and how miserable his living situation is, but rather people he might have hurt, that's when he can get on the right side and get towards eventually getting out of there, and also a shorter sentence with better messaging.
And here's the gag. Diddy isn't even mixing with the general population. But don't think for a second that means he's living it up. They've tucked him away in what they call the special housing unit. It's where they keep all the high-profile inmates, people who need extra protection, or those they consider a security risk. The drama of it all.
When you talk about what we normally call special housing unit, so there's two types of detention in terms of being in special housing. One is administrative detention, and I'll go back to that point here in a second, and then disciplinary segregation. Disciplinary segregation is for individuals who have been went through a disciplinary process for an infraction of the rules and regulations of the institution, whether it be in a fight or any other acts that go against the policies of the institution, the orderly and safe running of the institution, and that is for a specific period of time. What Mr. Combs may be in as far as administrative detention is when someone is under investigation for a possible infraction against the rules of the institution, or they could be in protective custody because they may fear of their life, which is a question probably would have been asked of him once he was in his intake process. Additionally, we're talking about someone who was high profile, who was just arrested here less than 3 weeks ago.
Picture this, a man who literally couldn't go anywhere without a massive entourage and crowds of adoring fans screaming his name. now sitting in complete silence. It's heartbreaking, really. His conversations, limited to these super brief monitored phone calls and the occasional chat with guards. And get this, every single time he wants to step out for some fresh air, he has to go through a full body strip search. Talk about humiliating. It's like watching a king being forced to become a commoner.
And what do we mean by a lockdown? These lockdowns are akin to solitary confinement. People are relegated to their cells for 23, 24 hours a day for an interminable period of time. They're denied access to showers. They're denied access to hot food. They're denied access to the telephone to speak with their loved ones. It's much more difficult for them to meet with their attorneys in any sort of expeditious fashion. It puts a tremendous amount of strain on people, and that's just notwithstanding the sort of psychological impact of being confined to a very tiny cell with another person for days at a time. In addition to the psychological impact of being locked in on a regular basis, our clients routinely complain about inadequate amounts of food that oftentimes is inedible. People routinely complain of inadequate access to recreation. So I have clients there who throughout their entire time at MDC Brooklyn never saw the sun, never were allowed to go outside and be able to just breathe fresh air. There's also the issue of safety. So when there's a dispute or when there's a problem between, detainees, and you can obviously imagine how being locked up for interminable periods of time only enhances the stress level and enhances the tension.
The tea gets even hotter. Former inmates and prison consultants are saying the SHU experience is basically psychological torture. Can you believe it? Diddy might be worth billions, but in the SHU, he's just another number in their system. The fall from grace is absolutely devastating.
Diddy has been in the spotlight for decades. He's obviously got a pretty big bank account, living in mansions in multiple cities, and that's what he's used to. And all of a sudden, he's in a prison that's being described as deplorable. I mean, just that unto itself, is that a major change?
Of course, the bigger they come, the harder they fall, and I sort of think that's what the prurient interest of the public is. Jail is terrible for anybody. But for someone who's used to having people wait on them hand and foot and never stands in line and always, gets front row and gets the best table and gets to have the exact opposite, what a life-changing moment. I mean, it's just incredible. And, it brings into context our whole system of innocent until proven guilty. Why is he not being given bond? And, we could debate that all day long. Of all people that's unlikely to flee or get away, well, he's got the resources to flee, but he's so recognizable. And isn't he innocent until proven guilty? Well, yeah, but we have to recognize there are degrees of innocent until proven guilty. When you have this much evidence.
Now you might be thinking, but surely his wealth can buy him some comfort. Well, honey, let me tell you, the federal system doesn't play that game. A former inmate named Timothy Smith spilled all the details. Apparently, in places like MDC, your bank account means absolutely nothing. They're so strict that even getting basic hygiene products feels like trying to get a backstage pass at the Grammys.
So, it's hard for me to speak to each individual's experience. I'm confident that no matter who you are or where you're being held in MDC Brooklyn, it is an extremely challenging place. And again, what makes it so challenging is that it's like essentially like a black hole. So if you have an emergency medical issue, if your blood sugar is too high and you're a diabetic or you have some sort of a heart attack or a medical emergency, there's absolutely no guarantees that you're going to be receiving medical care. I've heard horror stories from clients where one of their cellmates has collapsed and they're banging on their cell door during a lockdown, begging for a correctional officer to come and intervene, and nobody comes for minutes. And again, I'm not saying that's because people in the MDC Brooklyn don't care. I'm just saying there's not enough of them there. And it shouldn't be the case that while you're awaiting trial on serious federal charges, that you also have to be worried, am I going to make it out of here alive? Or am I going to make it out of here without being, stabbed or beaten? Dealing with a federal criminal case is stressful enough. And having to sort of deal with all the other atmospherics at MDC Brooklyn makes it truly unbearable.
This is where it gets really dark. Psychologists have been studying what isolation does to people, and it's absolutely terrifying. They're saying it can lead to depression, paranoia, and, I can't even believe I'm saying this, actual hallucinations. The mental toll this must be taking on him.
Solitary confinement is toxic to mental function. There's a particular illness that results from being in solitary confinement. It's a delirium. It's a neuropsychiatric, almost a medical, a neurologic disease. What we see in humans, we see it in animals, we see it in mammals.
Now, suppose that in addition to an environment that is merely strange, we produce one that's really frightening.
Dr. Harry Harlow in the 1950s did some experimentation with monkeys, studying the effect of social isolation. And one of his experiments involved taking monkeys who had been raised with other monkeys, so they were socialized and okay, and then putting them in what was amounted to a solitary confinement chamber.
Distressed. He may die for want of love.
You'd see them rocking and shaking and sort of ritualistic, compulsive behavior. And after some period of time, they brought them out and put them into a cage with other animals. These monkeys were massively impaired. They were frightened, hiding. And then they would have sudden aggression, attacking each other. Very different behavior, very abnormal behavior. There was no recovery. These animals didn't recover from this.
And if you think that's dramatic, wait until you hear this. These federal cases, they're basically impossible to beat. The conviction rate is over 90%. The odds are stacked against Diddy like a tower of Jenga blocks ready to fall. His legal team is fighting tooth and nail, but the stakes? They're higher than his penthouse apartment. We're talking about potentially spending the rest of his life behind bars. Can you even imagine?
Yeah, he does. It could be a long time, and it's all going to depend on how this trial turns out. So for the racketeering conspiracy charge, the maximum penalty is life in prison. But in 2022, people convicted of RICO crimes served an average of around 10 years in jail, so it's going to depend on that. For the sex trafficking charge, the Department of Justice says the average sentence ranges from 15 to 30 years, but there's a mandatory 15-year minimum sentence that's set by federal law for victims who are 14 and under. So it could be a lot more based on the number of victims. We're just going to have to wait and see. And then for the transportation for prostitution charge, sentences do range from 5 to 10 years, but it really does depend on the circumstance for that one. So 10 years is the statutory maximum under the federal law, so we'll have to see what comes out in the case.
But here's the thing that's got everyone talking. Sources close to Diddy say he's still holding his head high, absolutely determined to clear his name. Some people are saying he's using his isolation time to plan his comeback, channeling that same unstoppable energy that made him the music mogul we all know. But as the trial gets closer and closer, you can feel the tension building like the countdown to New Year's Eve.
We made a bail appeal to Judge Carter. It did not go our way. The fight continues. We're not giving up by a long shot. I told Mr. Combs I'm going to try and get his case to trial as quickly as possible. I'm going to try and minimize the amount of time he spends in very, very difficult and I believe inhumane housing conditions in the special housing unit of the Metropolitan Detention Facility. And I'm going to do everything that I can to move his case as quickly as possible. I understand that the government has a great amount of electronic devices that they have to download and provide to me. But everything's on the government's timetable, nothing's on the defendant's timetable, and they're going to have to accommodate me and him and give us a quick trial, and I'm going to be pushing for that. He's ready, he's focused. He has been ready to defend this case since he first found out about this case. Nothing has changed from his perspective.
Just think about it. The man who used to jet set between continents for breakfast, lunch, and dinner is now counting steps in a tiny cell. It's like watching a tiger being confined to a cage.
Diddy came inside, it was still that standard issued MDC jumpsuit. He's wearing khaki. From that video of, I think that was obtained by Daily Mail back in September, of Diddy playing hacky sack in Central Park, to now he appeared just astonishingly thinner, which you can expect to be inside a federal detention center for a couple months now. A lot different from the luxury lifestyle that he was living before, but he appeared very noticeably thinner, and maybe being locked up in detention is starting to wear on him. He appeared grayer a little bit as well too, but again, he appeared just like how you would expect Diddy to appear for a hearing. He, when he came inside the courtroom, he hugged his attorneys. He especially hugged Anthony Rico. Then he had hugged Alexandra Shapiro as well too. But then he kept kind of looking at the gallery. Now again, this was at a point where Diddy's sons, Justin and Christian, weren't inside the courtroom just yet, but instead.
But here's what's really got everyone buzzing. This whole situation is revealing so much about how fame and power really work in our world. As this story keeps unfolding, one thing's crystal clear. All eyes are on this case. It's not just about Diddy anymore, honey. It's holding up a mirror to show us all the complicated mess of wealth, power, and justice in America. His journey from the absolute top to, well, this. It's making us face some really uncomfortable truths about our society. What do you think about all this tea about Diddy's life behind bars? Is it really as awful as they're saying? Or is someone trying to spin the story? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Trust me, this story is just getting started and you won't want to miss what happens next.